Hi, I'm Patrick Long, aka the other Pat Long, running for alderman in Ward 7. I'm an attorney and an Iraq War veteran. I chose to get into politics because I see it as the best way that I can help others. I learned the value of service from a young age. My grandma kind of tricked me into it by telling me stories about my grandfather's time in the Marines. As a young boy, I originally found them entertaining because I was excited by the idea of war and adventure. But as I grew up, it became more about the sacrifices that he and really the whole family made on behalf of our freedom. She taught me how lucky we were to live in a free country and about the courage and dedication it took to maintain that freedom. My grandfather left his family at home to fight in 3 wars and ultimately gave his life in service to our country, but not in combat. He was exposed to radiation during the hydrogen bomb testing and died of cancer from that when I was a baby. So I never actually knew him, but I always looked up to him. And one of my biggest disappointments in life was that my grandma didn't live long enough to see me enlist when I was 18. Because of the impact that my grandfather's story made on me, I've dedicated myself to public service. I'm an immigration lawyer and, as I mentioned, an Iraq War veteran. I spent 7 years in the New Hampshire Army National Guard, 6 of those in Manchester. I'm a Democrat, but as someone who grew up in Tennessee, as a military veteran, a small business owner, and a small-time landlord, I understand the values of the other side, and I really appreciate New Hampshire's common sense, bipartisan approach to politics, at least when it happens. Politics should be about making people's lives better, not about scoring points for one side or the other. A good idea is a good idea, no matter who came up with it. I'm running because Manchester is facing significant challenges right now, especially a housing crisis that has driven a lot of people to homelessness and squeezed renters everywhere. I don't know what all the answers are here, and I would like to hear your ideas. But to start, we need to build more housing to help people get the treatment they need for substance abuse and mental health issues so they'll stay off the streets. I'll work to ensure that everyone who wants to buy or rent a home in Manchester is able to afford it. And addicts who want to quit need to be able to get help immediately when they're ready to quit so that they don't change their minds. In my law practice, I work with a lot of people who have mental health or substance abuse issues, and my experience is that it's important to be humane about meeting their needs while also demanding accountability for harmful behavior. And we also need to support our schools. We need to pay our teachers and other professionals what they're worth. And the first step in that is demanding that the state pay us our fair share of education dollars. And I'd appreciate your vote on November 7th.
Hi, and welcome to Ward 13. Meet the candidates. My co-host today is Mikey Martineau of Ward 10.
Thank you for having me, John.
And I am from Ward 8, formerly of Ward 10. And next week we'll be having Bill Barry, the longtime alderman from Ward 10, and possibly Gary Hamer, the school board member. But today we have Pat Long here, but albeit the other Pat Long, a noted karaokeist, although we'll invite him someday on one of our karaoke shows. Pat, how have you been doing in the last week?
Pretty good. Just knocking a lot of doors. That and work's all I've had time for.
It's going to be a nice weekend. You're going to be out?
No, I'm actually going to be working because I have a bunch of deadlines and client meetings this weekend.
Well,
so I'll have more time to knock doors during election week.
During the raw, it's going to be raw, like it's going to be in the 50s and stuff. Although that can actually benefit you in a way too, you know. I remember though, I was knocking on doors for Joyce Craig. It was 2015, and they thought I was getting pneumonia, but we wanted to get her in, and so you just do it. I've knocked on tens of thousands of doors.
Yeah, I knocked doors last Saturday when it was pouring rain, and ended up in the middle of it having to go home and put plastic bags around my socks to protect them from my wet shoes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember days like that, too. That's why I'm so glad my days of candidacy are over. Because 5 times to the post, 0 for 5. I'm tied with Eddie Goodell, the midget, who was the pinch hitter for the Browns in that game back in 1951 for Bill Veck's St. Louis Browns. So, 0 for 5.
And there's people in town that lost more elections than that, though.
Well,
you gotta pump those numbers up.
when you get somebody like a Tammy Simmons and her old friend Phil Griazzo, who was the Ward 10 alderman for Bill Berry, it was only one time. They would go to the post continually. I think Phil went 9 times before he won. But I might, memory being what it is, and Tammy goes to the post frequently too. Because this is New Hampshire, losing at first is not considered a negative thing. But Tammy's also runs for state offices, which I've done. I've only run for alderman at large one time, was to try to get people to talk about issues. Yet I would say, Mikey, that spectacularly failed. Because nobody really wants to talk about issues, except what issues are they talking to you about when you go door to door?
Biggest thing I get a lot of questions about is homelessness. I think that's on pretty much everyone's minds.
How do they frame the question?
Different people frame it different ways. I think people have a lot of different opinions on what we should do about the issue. Some of them don't really have an opinion, just want to know what my opinion is.
Because when I used to go knocking on doors, crime and taxes, they'd talk about. Crime
Those are still around.
Some people will associate homelessness with crime, possibly unfairly, and or because they've been aroused by a rabble-rouser, by Joe Kelly Lavasser, who, has a right to his opinions. But what are the opinions that people will often express an opinion to you? I actually enjoyed that part of going door to door.
Well, I get some of that association between crime and homelessness.
Right.
People worried because they see homeless people walking around their neighborhood who weren't there before. People saying we should do more to take care of our homeless population. So there's a whole spectrum of different opinions.
And any other issue they bring up other than homelessness?
Well, taxes, education.
Taxes is always, you could be anywhere in the United States, and it doesn't have to do with the tax cap. People are going to California. They're going to talk about their taxes. They gave us Proposition 13, taxes. But do people really? I've never found people really talking about education. But I never ran,
for school
an
board.
award for alderman or school board.
I think a lot of parents have questions about it, or people who have young grandchildren have questions about it.
And what do you tell them? As an alderman, what can an alderman do?
Well, the aldermen vote on the school budget, so the main thing is just support giving the schools what they need. So I support giving the teachers a raise, making sure that they're getting paid in line with the state average. And then I think we need to get the budget done faster because we have recruitment and retention problems with teachers and other staff as a result of taking too long on the budget.
When is the budget? What is the budget process? If you win, you'll be sworn in the first week of January. But when does the budget come up? Is that June?
I think mayor presents his or hers in February or March, and I think it has to be. Then it goes through all the.
That has to be the public has to weigh in.
Public hearings and whatnot, and I think it has to be a tax cap approved budget has to be approved by board mayor and alderman and mayor
And
by
Concord even has a say in that. You have to send up there for whatever the tax rate is or something.
yeah. So I think mayor presents it in February, March, and then they work on it until it's due, which is June, July, something like that.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think.
So you would how would the board could speed that process up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is people. People have their priorities and they want to debate their priorities.
What are we talking about?
But,
Constituents or all the?
well, mostly I'm talking about the alderman.
Yeah.
Although I think the mayor has a role in this too. If the mayor could get the budget done sooner, a proposal done sooner, then we could potentially finish it sooner.
And of course, the chairman of the board in our city, because of the charter, there's both a board of mayor and aldermen, which consists of the mayor and the board of aldermen. Now, I've gone in with Bill Cash and late Bill Cash, who was 36 years alderman. There's a reason for that. We're not going to go into it. But that's why you also have a chair. You will, if you get elected, vote on a chairman of the aldermen, of the board of aldermen, whereas the mayor is the chairman of the board of mayor and aldermen. Yeah, So the chairman actually has a say in all this too, just as the chairman of the board of aldermen and the mayor meet to set the agenda.
Yeah, and then the school board also has a role in this because they have to
Right.
put their budget out before the alderman can vote on it.
When do theirs
that's-
comes, because they get elected at the same time and put in. So, but I'm
Sometime-
sure a lot of it is from the year previously. There must be a holdover.
Yeah,
And the people from the district, Manchester School District, have to put their input in.
yeah. I mean, I think this is one reason why more autonomy for the school board makes sense if we can figure out a better proposal for doing it than the one that was put forward this year, is because having to have both boards vote on it does delay it, and that's part of why it takes so long to get done.
Right, because the original, when the 9-person commission met, it would give them autonomy, but the Board of Aldermen effectively had a veto, and that they had veto their budget. They had to, in other words, they had to approve the budget. But that would have put most of the work on the school, on them. Well, that proposal was made, and as an alderman, you could always just put that forward,
Yeah, so I don't think that particular proposal is the one that I would want to see. I talked about last week about more of what I would want to see in that proposal, which is I think basically we need to set a separate school tax cap and a city tax cap, and then say the school board can vote anything up to a school tax cap
I
on
see
their
what you
own
mean, yeah.
initiative. And then if they want to override that, the alderman would have to vote on the override.
That's a good
And
compromise.
I think that would actually put some pressure on them to, really make decisions about what's a priority. Also, because then they can have a tax cap budget faster versus an over tax cap budget that's going to take longer to get approved.
That's an excellent idea. You could actually propose that even as a civilian, somebody can make a proposal. But that sounds like an excellent compromise. But we live in a town where, politics is frequently bare-knuckled.
Well, so far,
All or nothing,
well, I haven't seen that so far in this race. So my opponent's been pretty nice. So
I'm thinking about the olden days. Yeah, Ross is a friend of us all.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I used to be a resident of Ward 7, so... Yeah, so... For 2 years.
oh, yeah.
Yep. Over on Wilson Street.
Oh, speaking of which, John, if you want to run for ward clerk, you can move to Ward 7 because there's nobody on the ballot right now.
I don't need the $175. I remember Joel used to, our friend Joel Elber, now lives in Concord. He used to work down there, so he could get the 150 or 175 or whatever it is. But I've actually worked the polls once, not in New Hampshire but California, and it's a pain in the backside. The people that do that for their little pay and everything, that's a hard job. And
It is.
and to get that, when they get the numbers out, they get it accurate, because those machines we have are very accurate. We had the same machines in California in the 90s. Yeah. No election denial here. If you lose, do you plan on claiming that you were defrauded, bamboozled, or whatever, or is that just for MAGA people?
I guess if there's actual evidence of it, I would make the claim, but I wouldn't make these sorts of unfounded claims that certain people have made about the 2020 election.
Right, and we won't localize that, even though we could, because that's the ward next to Ward 7. But, Mikey, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's nice to see people who haven't been established run. So and Ross is a good friend of mine, and I have friends all over this city. So it's nice to see newcomers come in, and it's not having the same faces as name. Have new people stand up to the plate and have a chance at office, and it's awesome to infuse new blood into the political system here in Manchester.
Well, Mikey, you're right, except for one thing. It's a new face, but it's an old name.
Yeah. Both a cat and a alderman.
You need to put an initial in there, buddy.
Yeah.
Like there was John C. Hopwood and John E. Hopwood, J-O-N, at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California in 1985. Are your campaign signs green?
They are.
Okay, yeah, there you go. And you always associate the name Pat with Irish, that can't hurt you. Well, Democrats are usually blue or green. I've used both colors. Neither one successfully. And I've used the American flag, which, I'm just a hopeless case. But Mikey you are developmentally, what would you call it, challenged individual.
Yes.
And I have several people like that in my family. What can an alderman do to help that community?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the school budget. A lot of that is special education. So we can help our students who are developmentally challenged get their needs met. Beyond that, I don't know. I would need to see proposals. But I think generally we can make the city more friendly to people with all kinds of disabilities.
Is there anything the alderman can do in the creating some places call it a civil rights commission. Some people call it a human rights commission. They had one in Lewiston, Maine, and Portland, Oregon, and places like that.
I'm open to the idea. I don't know how much they've actually accomplished in any of these places, so I need to see more about that and see if it actually makes sense to do.
Right. One of the problems with New Hampshire's a home rule state, so it's one of the other things I proposed was a whistleblower municipal statute, which some cities have. But New Hampshire is a very weak state law, and being a home rule state, I guess in New Hampshire, a city cannot have a more stringent law than the state, which isn't true in other states, like in New York or California. You can actually probably have a more stringent law.
Yeah, so, I mean, you've got more experience with this law than I do. So,
right, and that was one of the issues I had, and nobody would address that. Even people that were so-called, this was before George Floyd, advocates of civil rights. But that might be one of the reasons is a city could be limited to that. But a alderman as an individual can use the bully pulpit to champion the rights of people.
Yeah. So, as what have been the biggest flaws in your experience with the whistleblower law?
Well, there really is no whistleblower law in New Hampshire. We could have a whole show from that, but you'd have to come back after the election because I got Bill Barry on next week from the Ward 10 show. And, well, we had a problem. There's problems with things that don't get reported. We were going to read about the origins of the term slush fund, but I think we don't have the time for that. And this is from the trivia from the Peter White morning show.
Okay.
And there are things that people know that go on in this municipality and other municipality, but people are afraid to come forward. I'd worked on that. There was a proposal of that in 2015. Actually, Joe Kelly Lavasser was behind it. That's when I was still friendly with Joe. But that kind of went nowhere. One of the problems that we've seen, things coming out, was when we had, under the former mayor, Ted Gatzis, we built, what was it, is it the Coit building? What's that building up near the north of the fire station, Mikey?
No.
You know the one that was a furniture store once, and they turned it into a homeless.
Hoyt Furniture on the
right
corner of Valley and Wilson, right?
Yeah, not homeless, but it was substance abuse, and it came out that they had fudged.
The Hope Center?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yes, the Hope Center. Yeah, and it came out that they were fudging the credentials of the counselors and the people there. And at one point, according to Danny O'Neill, who was the chairman of the board, this was years ago too, we'd pumped $5 million into there. It did come out, I think Mark Hayward and the union leader broke the story. But a lot of people are afraid to come forward and report things that are wrong because retaliation is severe, even in states with strong whistleblower protections.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody should have to be afraid to report honest and accurate information about something that's going on, especially something that's going on with your tax dollars. I think people have a right to know about that.
But you see, like with the Ted Gatz's situation, with the cover up of the high school rape, West High rape, that went on for 2 years, and then somebody, well, the only way we found out about that was because the county attorney sentenced the kid that was involved in the rape. That's the first time we hear about it after 2 years, and then somebody, a whistleblower, revealed something that the then mayor didn't want known and later disputed. But for these things to happen, people don't come forward because of retaliation. But, I should have talked to you about whistleblowing before that. That's one of my things. I was down at the National Whistleblower Center in Washington, D.C.
Well, at least in theory, the state's whistleblower law prohibits retaliation. But I guess with any law, you've always got to wonder about whether the enforcement mechanisms are actually there to make people actually have to comply with it.
You also have to have a case law that's developed. Frequently in a program that's received federal funding, which a lot of municipal programs do, you might have recourse to a federal court. But, you always have to go through, you have to establish standing and that. What are we going to light a fire under you about? I was bringing up about civil rights and that because you are an expert on immigration.
I am.
And so why don't you tell the folks first about being an immigration lawyer? You've been on the show a couple times and have explained it, but some people might be brand new. So you talk about what you do, and then let's talk about immigration, its impact on Manchester.
Okay. So I'm a lawyer, not exclusively immigration, but that's what most of my practice is. So I've been doing that since the end of 2014. It's sort of interesting because most areas of the law are fairly stable over time, but immigration changes significantly depending on who's the president at any given time, because the executive branch just has a lot of discretion in how the laws are implemented. I think one of the more interesting ways that this ends up being relevant actually to this race for alderman is that I have worked over time with a lot of clients who are suffering from mental health issues or substance issues or poverty, the kinds of issues that cause people to become homeless, and that's the biggest crisis facing the city right now. And so it is interesting how there's sort of a need to strike a balance and realize that in some ways, life has been unfair to these people and we need to help them overcome that, but also that people need to learn to take responsibility for their own actions and their own outcomes, and if they don't do that, then things are never going to improve for them, no matter what you do for them.
Well, we'll get to that. We can go to that, but first, how is immigration affecting Manchester, and how does the Board of Mayor and Aldermen respond to that? If anything, right?
We have a lot of immigrants here in Manchester. I think they're making a positive contribution to the community for the most part. There's always exceptions. I think most people would say it's the immigrants from Massachusetts that are causing the biggest problems.
Well, we don't use the term Massachusetts, but this is 4 o'clock. We're not allowed to use the other term, or Taxachusetts, as they call it.
Yeah.
But,
so I don't know that the city specifically needs to be doing anything in response to immigration.
Well, one of the things is we're going to have a Spanish immersion program. uh, which is addressing the issue of people from Spanish language countries coming in and their needs in education.
Yeah, so, I mean, whether people are immigrants or not, I think we should be working to meet their needs. And so I do support the Spanish immersion program.
Yes. Has there been, in your time in Manchester, has there been anything negative? I don't see anything. Like, in Lewiston, Maine, which is not quite a sister city of Manchester, they had some problems with a mayor that made Ted Gatsas look like the second coming of Christ. Baiting immigrants. A popular sport when things are going wrong in your town and you need somebody to lash out at. But so I've never seen Mayor Gatsas was pretty pro-immigrant, and so is Joyce Craig. And I think, indeed, the program was a program where that was Mayor Wazorek, about welcoming immigrants to Manchester, even when Rich Gerard, I think, was his chief of staff. So there is that history. So there's no problem. I don't with
Yeah, I mean, if Manchester didn't welcome immigrants, Portsmouth would still be the biggest city in New Hampshire. They had all the French Canadians come here to work in the mills. So I think
can we show the background of Grace Metalius? There she is, Grace Metalius, who wrote Peyton Place, which was at one time the best-selling novel in the world except for the Bible. And in the year 2000, I'd read my parents, for World War II, with Grace and George Metalius, her husband. Grace had moved over to what's now Ward 10, the Squag. She lived on 3rd Street. Her and my mother were from around the Pearl Street School area in the East Side. You see, these are mixed marriages in the old days, East Side, West Side. But I told my father about her being French Canadian. He says, she wasn't French Canadian. And yes, indeed, Dad, she was a French Canadian. But they used to drink before my father and George went off to World War II. And the French Canadians, of which I'm part French Canadian,
Yep.
and you're part French Canadian,
Yes.
or Franco-American, but we all call it French Canadian. We're the last, one of the last groups in. And there were all sorts of terrible things and tensions and everything. Although everybody, finally the Irish, who were probably their main tormentors, eventually intermarried. You have to remember, in Manchester, the French diocese had its own schools and churches, and the Irish did too. And they would often exist not far from each other, And but I always found that funny that my father didn't know Grace Metalius was French Canadian. But it's like my mother, when she was part French Canadian, until we finally got her in her 70s to admit it, because it's just the complexities of identity and all that. But my father just thought she was Greek or Irish or something. And there are other stories about Grace Metalius, both as a young lady and when she drank herself to death up at Lake Winnipesaukee, for another hour, another show, probably not during prime time.
Well, I mean, usually you can tell from people's last names because if you look at the last names of people in New Hampshire, they're a lot different than most other places in America because of the French-Canadian immigration.
Well, it's funny, somebody like Audie Murphy, who's from Texas, the most decorated soldier in history, is Irish, but he was actually a Protestant because when the Irish got into Texas, there was no Catholic churches. But you would find Catholic churches in the South, like Mississippi and wherever there were fishermen, because Sicilians and Italians were traditionally fishermen, and they would come and you'd find a Catholic church there, but nowhere else. Like, you'd be in Atlanta in the 70s. Everybody was a Protestant.
Well, I went to Catholic high school in Tennessee, so
You did?
They existed by that point.
That's right. Well, I never heard of any Catholics in Tennessee. But I'm an old man, aren't I, Mikey? And I haven't been there, driven through, but my experience was the early 80s.
There's definitely an anti-Catholic element there.
Oh, yeah, the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan was anti-Catholic. That was one of its big things.
It's founded in Tennessee, so.
Oh, yeah. And is Nathan Bedford Forrest from Tennessee?
He is.
Oh, wow.
Learn something new every day.
The volunteer state. But are your roots really go back all in? Are they all Tennessee?
Well, they're all Tennessee by my generation. So most of my family came here, originally settled in Maryland or New Jersey.
Maryland, which was the only Catholic colony.
And then sort of migrated south from there.
Okay.
So you go back like 5 generations. Most of my ancestors were in Virginia by that point.
They're from the British Isles. Yeah. Well,
some.
You know.
Some from Germany, some Swiss, Austrian.
Should be over in the west side. We had we had a German section over there. You'll find Bismarck Street. But then you go to Penardville, and all these streets, that's Goffstown. Although there's a little section in Manchester, are named after the French generals of World War I.
Well, so Long is actually a German last name, but it's one that got butchered in the immigration process.
Well, Pat Long is Irish. The other Pat Long.
Well, mine's of German origin, so it's originally Lange, Lange, but nobody knows what that means in English, so they just changed it to Long.
Well, Tim Smith from Ward 10, his real name was Smidgen, but they changed it to Smith, and the alderman before Phil Griazzo and Bill Barry was named Smith, so they all thought he was his grandson, and he won election after election, so, hey, that's why sometimes you'll see Mary Heath suddenly is Mary Sullivan Heath, although as if Heath isn't Irish too, and we don't know that she's a Sullivan. But these are just the strange things in there. The one thing when you get into politics, you realize in Manchester is everybody knows each other from either high school, from playing sports, from being a coach. Like Bill Barry was a coach. So many people are coaches. And like if you're with Bill Barry campaigning, everybody's waving. Everybody knows who he is, or they all know each other from having kids and being in the PTA. Then you'll see some real rivalries. But we won't go into that. But the thing is, my brother once came back here to visit my mother, and we were talking to our neighbors we'd known our life. We're French Canadian, and they were mad about immigration from Latin America. My brother told me it was all I could do to stop laughing, because we were kids. Everybody, all these frogs are coming down from Quebec, and je me souviens, we remember. That was a big thing when I was a kid. But what do you do? The French Canadians became part of the melting pot.
Yeah, and I think most people do eventually.
Right. That happens.
It doesn't happen instantly, but...
No. A lot of people, it's just the elderly people really that speak French still on the west side. You'll still hear it spoken, where it was a real second language when I was a kid. But my generation didn't really learn French.
I only had 1 year of it in middle school, and I didn't retain anything. So
see, in the old days, the parochial school, you went to the French school till you're 8, but you were in English and French. Then if you were no good in French, you didn't go to high school, and then you're off in the public schools. But yeah, then there's always the question about accents and stuff. I tell you, it's a lot easier to understand Quebecois French than somebody in Paris. But so this is, I think we can be proud that this is a city that has accepted so many immigrants and integrated them so well into the society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And our school system is doing a great job of integrating them into our system and getting these people up to speed and into the various programs that our school system has that helps them along to help them succeed in life.
Now, is there going to be any issue with migrants coming here? We keep talking about the issue of migrants. Will it just be the same thing?
I mean, I think, if people come in, they're allowed to settle wherever they want within the United States. So I think a lot of that's just going to depend on the opportunities that are available. We do have a labor shortage right now, so maybe some people want to come here if they have the appropriate skills to fill the jobs that are they're empty right now.
Hell, I could never understand why anybody would want to come here when you could go to California or someplace with a nice climate, you know? But they do. And one of the things when I got back here, I got here back here in 2010. So, like, the valedictorian of Central High was from Somalia, and of West was from Bosnia, you know? But that's basically the society like my parents grew up in, with all sorts of people from all over.
So I keep thinking I don't like the New England winters, but then I hear about all the natural disasters everywhere else in the country. It's like, having to wear a coat is not nearly as bad as, like, having your house burned down or burned down by a hurricane.
But that's in North Dakota. It floods, and then the town burns down. I can never understand how a place that's flooded can burn down, but it happens. But in Tennessee, except for some rednecks shooting out of the pickup truck, when I went down south, what I was always surprised was they always had signs, you're in some county, right? Because county government here, which you've probably realized now, is not, it gets money, but it doesn't really do anything. And we can get to that because I once ran for county commissioner, thinking the county commissioner could do a lot for this city. But the other thing was that all the signs had multiple bullet holes through them. Is that still the South? Where they just shoot
I think
the signs?
That would be pretty uncommon.
It wasn't in the 70s. Burt, like a Burt Reynolds movie.
I think it's a little more civilized now. At least
those Yankees that have come down there.
I grew up in Knoxville, which is the third biggest city in Tennessee.
Is that the capital?
No. Nashville is the capital. But Knoxville actually has a bigger population than Manchester. So it's not,
Chattanooga is the one city I know because my father lived there for a while.
So it's urbanized. It's maybe a little bit different than cities up north, but it's, it's not the boonies.
Are there any natural disasters you can tell us about?
Tornadoes all the time.
So you're in a that's a tornado, but that's not Tornado Alley.
No, because it's protected by the mountains it's surrounded by. But most of the rest of Tennessee, yeah.
I could never understand. Go to California, earthquakes. You get used to them. I was through a big one too, but
yeah, until one destroys your house.
Well, that's one of the advantages of being, a lower class. You don't own anything. Now, if it swallowed up my car, which Rost is doing, that might be a different thing. But, yes, I'm just an irresponsible old fart, and I was always an irresponsible young fart, too. Are you irresponsible, or do you consider yourself a responsible person?
No, I'm pretty responsible.
Okay. You seem responsible.
You have to be an attorney. You got to keep track of deadlines.
We're thinking about an attorney we know that you might be serving on the board with. Although in court he does okay. I'm just teasing.
Yeah. You've got significant rights of other people's are affected by an attorney's performance. So you really have to be on top of everything and be responsible.
Right. If you screw up, it's just that's a disaster.
Yeah, the biggest thing people get in trouble for actually is stealing client funds.
Yeah, I was threatened with a lawsuit by a right-wing politician, and they had their own, these libertarians, the Free Staters have their own lawyers, but two of them only one threatened to sue me, and then I retracted, but I got information that was even worse, because I could put that in the retraction. He got disbarred for exactly what you're talking about, and another one, but he just threatened me. He didn't, a little, But what can a lawyer bring to the Board of Aldermen? There's only one lawyer on the Board of Aldermen I know of, and that's Joe Kelly Lavasser. I'm not saying that in any negative way, but you do have a way of looking at things that would be different from somebody like, the other Pat Long, his experience, he was in the iron worker, and he was the business agent in the Ironworkers Union, which is a valuable experience itself. You're going to have two firemen who are also the chiefs of the department, that's a valuable experience, not just their experience as a fireman, but as they know all about bureaucracy, handling of bureaucracy. Chief Burkish was one of the people, Ted Gatz, he would give Ted Gatz no latitude. And but what can a lawyer bring to that board?
So I think there's a few things. The first is the ability to see an issue from all sides. And if you just think about TV lawyers, you may not realize this because on TV they're pounding the table, shouting their opinion. But to really advocate effectively for a client, you have to understand how the other side sees it. You have to understand how a judge is going to see it. And so you need to understand all the perspectives and then advocate for the one that you want to advocate for. But come from that place of understanding all of them. And then the other thing is the ability to really understand details, understand nuance of an issue, because some things...
The ability to read a contract, which you're going to... Alderman goes over lots and lots of contracts.
Yeah. Some of these things are very complicated, and the ability to understand those details is important.
I'm glad you brought that up about a lawyer, because there's the public perception of a lawyer because of TV, and I grew up with Perry Mason, and when my brother came back, he was here. He had some problems with getting back into the UK because the conservative new prime minister changed the rules, and my brother, being a lifer, everything was always done for him. Right now he's retired, so he screwed up. So he got stuck in the States for a bit. What it came down to is the England wanted more money, and that's but. So we're watching Perry Mason, the old Perry Mason with Raymond Burr, and we figured out they just pick who's guilty. There's no rhyme or reason, there's no way to figure it out. It's just like randomly picked. That was just part of the fun of it. And but the reality of a lawyer, they have the lawyers always one-sided in this, is you've got to see both sides in order to be effective, in order to deal with whatever strategy is coming from the other side. Then you have the judge. And what it does, with depth, it's like having two eyes to give you depth perception.
Yeah.
It gives you an understanding of the depth of the field.
And you also want to understand the other side, because maybe what the client wants to do is too optimistic. And if you can understand that other perspective and help them see it, then they can make a better decision for their situation.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed about lawyers, not Joe Kelly-Lavasser though, is you're very disciplined about how you speak. Tim Smith was like that, although he wasn't a lawyer. He was an excellent state rep. He's no longer the state rep there at Ward 10. But he but that's a disaster because you got a loudmouth over here. Have you ever been on the Jim O'Connell show?
No, I haven't.
Oh boy! If you think I'm bad as a irresponsible chatterbox, you've got to go on Jim's show. But once again, I think that when it comes to the schools, what an alderman can do is be an advocate. Because I know that people. My sister moved out of Manchester to another town that spent like 50% more per student because she had two special needs kids, and it just wasn't being answered here. And I have seen parents go through the Board of Aldermen and plead for help. Of course, most people don't understand the Board of the School Committee, the powers it has. But an alderman can be an effective advocate. Yeah.
And especially aldermen generally know the members of the school board, can talk to them about the issues that are within their jurisdiction. And I have a good relationship with Chris Potter, who's the current school board member for Ward 7 and is running for re-election.
Well, in Manchester, you get to know everybody, and people work across wards, too, not just the aldermen at large. It can be collegial at times, and then sometimes it can't be, depending on... There's two people from the past I'm thinking about that were on this board of the school committee that did not make things collegial. But, yeah. Hey, we talked about, going back to something like whistleblowing and stuff like that. We were talking about last week about Emily Rice and her ukase, I'm going to use a word from Russian, that aldermen don't have the right to get information about specific guests at the beach, street shelter. Now, there's a difference between saying that they don't have a right to information and they don't have a right to information about specific guests. There are things from law. We had to do this once in a different situation here in Manchester, where you can, under law, you can give people just a code name. Because there's a lot of situations where anonymity is essential, because people won't come forward, and they're afraid of retaliation. Now, there are common sense solutions, I think, to every type of situation. That doesn't mean, following politics for the past 10 years, that people are going to actually implement a common sense solution.
Yes, so I think the aldermen need access to the information that will help make policy.
Right.
So that's not the names and what beds people are sleeping in. That's the numbers of people who are suffering from a particular type of problem, numbers of people who've been there for a particular time, numbers of people who, for example, we've tried to connect with employment.
Right.
Those kinds of things that allow them to address the overall situation. And I think it's completely reasonable, and the alderman should be asking for to drill down in some of that. So say how many people have been there since the shelter opened, and more specifically what's going on with those people. But you don't need their names to do that.
No.
You need
And
diagnosis.
that information can be made anonymous. But one thing, when I was looking into the issue, people always bring stuff up. I haven't been writing anything during this election, really, for various reasons, mostly to do with a bad back. But if somebody acts, whenever there is a law that Congress passed during the COVID crisis that had the proviso that in shelters receiving the monies, that the privacy rights of individuals at shelters receiving funded monies have to be respected. But they've had the proviso that it was state and local statutes. One thing you could address the issue is actually having a statute, a city ordinance that could protect the anonymity of these people. There's a lot of, and there's also states, but this isn't for you, this is for our state reps. There are 3 states that have a Bill of Rights for homeless people. And one of the provisos is a guarantee that they have privacy rights at a shelter. And these are things I think that people can address and work on, instead of having these dramas and stuff. But of course, when we talk about drama, I'm thinking about a certain quarter that pumps out, that makes the drama, right? But see, the thing about aldermen saying that you don't have a right to information is, I always go back to what had happened with the mayor under the new charter. Was given a lot of power. And it actually shifted power from aldermen and the departments towards the mayor. And as Bill Cashewin said, who was a critic of that charter, because he was always for the alderman. It's like one of those people you read about in England, where Parliament is supreme and everything. Is that they didn't expect Ted Gatsas to behave the way he did, I mean, we have a good mayor now who's doing the best and handling a difficult situation when we get to the homeless. But I guess what I'm saying is, and a thing that you could bring to the board is a certain rationality to things, because you can see that there's individuals on both boards have either helped situations or hurt them. One person can make a difference. But
yeah, I agree. I think we need to be focused on finding solutions to problems and be practical, and not be focused on pursuing ideological ends or personal vendettas or whatever the case may be.
Or giving into emotional responses to situations. But I just say there is a tension in that charter between the powers of the mayor as both mayor and chair of the board of mayor and aldermen, and the board of aldermen, which is part of the board of mayor and aldermen. It comes from just putting two charters together. And on the charter commission that put that on, there were minimum three that ran for mayor, and there were probably several others on that chart who wanted to be mayor. And that might be one of the reasons why the mayor was beefed up, because the aldermen do have their prerogatives. Like Danny O'Neill is a very strong chairman of the board of aldermen. But yeah.
Well, maybe next time we have a charter commission, we should only elect people who've lost a race for mayor, and then
but
that'll
it's just
straighten things out.
It's just as in a court, everything's a balance, right? Somebody you have a. Oh, Christ! Sorry about that. We're not.
Is that somebody trying to call in?
No, we have nobody calls on the show. When we were at night, everybody called in. Although, were you here when I'm looking for a new car. Sorry, I didn't turn that off. Yeah, my car. I lived in California so long. One of the things it took me only recently that I kept it. You don't have to just check the weather every day. You have to do it every few hours. In California, the weather never changed. And then I thought cars have been. They had handled the problem with rust. Little did I know. After it's a 2006 brand new, so it's been. I've had it since 2006. So yeah, the rust finally.
Yeah, you do have to check the weather every few hours. I went out at 9 o'clock this morning to let the exterminator into my basement because I had a rat problem, like a lot of people in Ward 7. So mine seems to be resolved now, but still have the guy come every few months. And it was 49 degrees out, and then so I was getting ready to come here, and I was prepared to go out in the cold, and it's 74. So
yeah, I've got I got two shirts on. I was getting ready because I thought it was yesterday, but it was too late. I have some clothes in my car that I could put on, but yes. But you are a Manchesterite. You have dedicated yourself to this city and its future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what even your opponent Ross Terrios recognized that, and he was saying he should run for a state rep, but of course you can't. Nobody can be a state rep that has a job, right?
It's definitely harder to do that when you have a regular job because it's
Yes.
so much time at the State House.
I think that me and Mikey should be up at the State House. I would love to. Wouldn't you like to? You can remember with Steve Valancourt. You can have lunch and dinner and breakfast all day long during the entire thing. I thought that was a great positive, But he was a cantankerous SOB, wasn't he?
Well, the way the state legislature is supposed to work is you're supposed to come, in from your farm during the off season, and your like eldest kid will keep an eye on the other 9 kids while you're in Concord voting, and then you make your money the rest of the year during farming season.
And you don't vote you vote yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we the old Yankees are they're long gone though, and then the Irish took over things, but then the French Canadians wheedled their way in there finally. But just getting back to that, I used to have to hear all these things, Irish and French Canadian, and everybody was into marriage, and I still hear that from older people.
Good. It's how people assimilate.
Yes, but the thing about the French, you tell they're from the Celtic region of France, You can't even tell them apart, But then you go up to Quebec, and it was the thing between the English and the French. But that's a serious thing because, that's a francophone province. But we had a person on this show that went up there. He's all for Quebecois independence, But I wonder whatever happened to him.
No idea.
Do you have anything to say to the folks out there? Although we still got 5 minutes, but anything you want to tell them?
Well, I'd appreciate your votes on November 7th. So polls are open 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's at St. Anthony's Community Center on Belmont Street. So I think most of what I would say was already covered in my speech in the intro, if you watch that. But biggest issues I want to focus on are dealing with the homelessness crisis and making sure our schools have the resources that they need. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Well, one of the things that you've pointed out is that because of the lower pay for entry-level teachers, this city loses a lot of good teachers. Not, they can get poached. They just don't take the job because of the lateness of the budget. Those are things that have been talked about for years, and they haven't been addressed because there's people haven't taken. I hate cliches. These are things about cliches, Where does slush fund come from?
Oh, we got time to go over that, maybe.
Oh, we will after we say goodbye. But you can read
Oh,
this.
is that
in a
bad?
second. Well, it's very long, but I think that one person. It's not. I do believe a person on a board, even as big as the Board of Aldermen, can make a big difference. Okay, folks. Next week, Bill Barry will be here, and we'll do Ward 10. And we're going to end it now, but Mikey is going to read about the origins of the slush fund.
Before refrigerations, a sailor could count on a diet of salt pork. Whether fried or boiled, salt pork produced large amounts of grease, which cooks kept in large vats. Although the slush was used as a lubricant around the ship, there was always plenty left over. When the shift got to port, it became common practice to sell the fat and use the proceeds to buy small luxuries for the ship's enlisted men. This phrase has been adopted to describe a business or political operating budget. So that's where you get slush fund from.
Slush fund from the pork used to grease a ship.
Yeah.
Oh boy, and that's why we need a municipal whistleblower law, even if the state won't give us one. Yep. Yeah, you have any? These are off camera remarks. Although we're still on camera.
Yeah.
You're being too cautious. We should have got him karaokeing, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
If only Gonzo was here, the show would have probably broken into a melee in a fight.
Yeah.
This is just, we got one more minute or so.
Well, what happened to Gonzo? Where's he at now?
Gonzo's going to have another kid.
Jeez, 3 kids for him in 3 years? Jeez.
Well, he's a stud, man. And Gonzo doesn't have a job, although he is an artist.
Yes.
And he does have some income from that.
So is he going to be a stay-at-home dad?
I think that's what he is now. Right?
I think that's one of the reasons he can't make the show, because he's got to take care of. I don't want to call them brats. I don't have any kids myself. I used to want to be a father, but then there was literally, I got radiated in the army, and now that I'm an old man with nobody to take care of me, I really wouldn't want to have kids anyways, because kids can be, There's things in the Bible. I don't know the Bible very well that talk about how awful kids can be. I'm actually for abolishing public schools, but that's because they're a vestige of Protestantism.
That's probably why you never get
and
elected.
White supremacy. I don't get elected because I'm an expletive deleted, and hell, well, good luck.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I will edit this down to something for the YouTube that cuts out a lot of the BS.
Yeah. Until next time, folks.
Until next time.